Welcome to CLEF Notes, short answers to theological questions. We begin this morning by taking a look at these two different editions of the Ten Commandments, renditions, pictures. Take a look at the one on the left, and then take a look at the one on the right. What's the difference between the two? You see, the one on the left is missing a commandment on coveting, but adds a commandment on images. The one on the right doesn't have that commandment about images, but it does have two commandments on coveting. Well, what's going on there? Well, the simple answer is that the fact that there are 10 commandments is mentioned 3 times in the Old Testament, in Exodus 34, Deuteronomy 4, Deuteronomy 10. In those places, 10 commandments are mentioned, but they're not listed there. The listing of the 10 commandments is in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5, but there they're not numbered, because of course you remember when Scripture first came into being, there were no numbers, there were no verse numbers, there were no chapter numbers. They came much later. So the question became, well, how do you number the 10 commandments? There are 12 imperatives there that are given in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. Well, Augustine of Hippo, who was a pretty smart guy, a great theologian, was asked this question way back at the end of the 4th century, and in his Questions on Exodus, question 71, he takes on the issue. He takes on the issue of which numbering should we go with. And I'll post a link to that below, and you can take a look. There's about 4 paragraphs here as to why he chooses one over the other. And the numbering that he went with is what the Western Church stuck with then for the next 1,000 years. The numbering that you find in a Lutheran catechism, for example, or the Catholic catechism, the number that Luther was familiar with. And like I said, the reasoning is found there in Augustine. But during the Reformation, the left-hand version became very popular. Again, it was John Calvin in Geneva who really championed this idea of the commandment against images. And, of course, as we know, during the Reformation, lots of images were smashed and lots of artwork destroyed, and partially on the basis of this idea of the commandment, you shall not make for yourself a graven image. But then what do we do with the bronze serpent in the wilderness that God commanded Moses to make? And the people were to look at that bronze serpent when they were bitten by the fiery serpents, and they'd be saved. And Jesus himself then compares himself to that bronze serpent. Now, as you know, later on, King Hezekiah had to destroy that bronze serpent because people started worshiping it as an idol. So there's that distinction between the making of the image in the wilderness and the destruction of that image because it's become an idol by King Hezekiah. What happened in the Reformation? Why the emphasis on the smashing of images or the prohibition of images? That's an interesting question because, of course, Geneva was in southern Europe at that time, and who was coming that way? A large army of Islamic forces. Islam, of course, also prohibits the usage of images. And then you had the question of the Lord's Supper. What is the Lord's Supper? Where we say, the body and blood of Christ are in, with, and under bread and wine. What are bread and wine? Are they not created things? So what you have developed in Calvinism is a moving away from the idea of God being present in creation through created things, and the main driver in Christian theology being God's decision towards man. And that's what we have in the theology of Karl Barth in the 20th century. So, was that decision by Calvin to really push that commandment on images over against the tradition of the time definitive for what we call today Reformed theology? That is the theology from John Calvin. That's an interesting question. More work needs to be done there, especially as it was done at that time, at that specific time. And of course, we know today Reformed churches are still bare, right? No stained glass, no images, no pictures. Just a very wide open, clear space of nothing. Boy, that raises lots of questions, doesn't it? Well, They're questions for another time. We hope to provide short answers to theological questions here. I might have raised some more, but I hope you can join me next time on CLEF Notes.